Textbooks in the corner. My name is Rebecca. I know all of you guys. My name is Rebecca Hales. I'm a screenwriter. I have an undergrad in literature, and then I attended the Vancouver Film School for screenwriting, and then I got a master's degree in creative writing, and then I attended the Canadian Film Centre in Toronto, which is why I live in Ontario again. I have been working at this for 20 years. I'm a story editor. I mostly take other people's scripts and say, this works, this doesn't, move this way, and why is there a giant plot hole the size of the Grand Canyon here in the middle? That's what I do, and then I let other people do that for me. I started with Rebecca, this is my 4th year. So our first one was by Zoom when the entire conference was COVID lockdown, and just started teaching screenwriting. It's something that I've done for a long time in groups and individually. So I started with the real basics. So that first year was like, here's a 3-act structure. Here's what a page of a screenplay looks like. Here's how you format things. And that's online. If you want to look at that, you can find that online. The second year, we looked at making better conflicts. We talked about how if your protagonist's goal is A, your antagonist's goal is not B. Your antagonist goal is not A, right? We talked about those near misses where this is not actually in conflict. We spoke a lot about making better tension between your characters, which is important, and we'll talk about that a bit today. We talked a lot about making a story engine, and we talked about making that story engine big enough to get yourself all the way through a feature. So about building conflict into the basic concept so that the resolution of that, me figuring out a way to problem solve my way out of this, is going to take the entire length of a feature, as opposed to 10 minutes, one solution, and we're done, right? Last year, we looked at problem solving when you write. So one of the biggest things that happens with most of us is that we get into the middle of Act 2, which I call the Sahara. Once you get out of Act 1, it's just like 60 blank pages of terror. And so I'm like, once you get into that, if you stall out, usually the concept issue is where you are. There's a problem with the way you've created your character. There's a problem with the way that you've set up your world. So usually you have to go all the way back to there. There isn't like one line of dialogue that you can change and poof, everything is fixed. So we talked about that last year. We talked about making sure that you have a proper premise and not a really good punchline. We joked around about that at lunch yesterday, so we talked about that last year. We also talked about making sure that you've got the right character for the right world at the right time, so that all of those things come together properly and they work together as opposed to working against each other. We spoke a little bit about what happens when you have a character who's not working in your world. You end up with plot problems and you don't know why, because on paper your plot is beautiful and flawless, and there's not a hole in it anywhere, and then it turns out you got the wrong guy trying to drive you all the way through. So we talked about that last year. What I would like to do this year is I've nicknamed this lecture People Problems, because in the last probably year and a half, I have read a lot of scripts that have problems with their characters, or characters who are a problem. And I wanted to take time today to address that in more depth. So that's what we're going to do. Yeah? Okay. I'm going to start at the very beginning, which is tensegrity in characters. We talked about this 2 years ago, and I want to go into it in a little more depth. So tensegrity is really a physics issue. It's about tension and integrity. That's where the word comes from. And it's about using the tension between two things to help it hold its shape. So when we talk about characters holding tension, that's what we're doing. It's going to hold the shape of my story. So if I have my protagonist and my antagonist, they're enough alike that they're trying to come together. And they're also enough separate, they see the world in different enough ways, or they're operating on different principles or at a different level, and they're pulling apart. And because of that, they always sort of live at this distance. And it isn't until your protagonist changes through all of the decisions that they have to make that your protagonist can slowly come close enough to defeat, right? Okay. And we all know what I mean when I say protagonist versus hero. Protagonist is the person whose choices drive your story forward. Your hero usually wears tights and a cape. Yeah, okay, good. So your protagonist and your antagonist is usually pretty obvious how we are alike and how we are dissimilar, but you also have that same kind of tension in a piece with your protagonist and your secondary characters. So your buddy cop films, they all do this as well. We are enough alike, we have enough shared space that there's a little bit of a Venn diagram overlap, but we are dissimilar enough that we operate differently. And the fact that we do that is what creates enough conflict to keep us moving forward as a team, right? And it's also why we fall in love with the best friend. Writing that character is the most fun ever because they can go anywhere you want them to because you placed your protagonist and they're stuck. But anything else in opposition is free reign. So that's why we often fall in love with writing our secondary characters. One of the other things that happens there is having tensegrity in an ensemble piece. And I didn't really touch on this 2 years ago, so I want to touch on it today. When you have an ensemble piece, you do what I call the character wheel. And I literally will put like either the central theme or my clear protagonist in the middle. And then I just put the characters around and I make sure they live in opposition to one another, right? So if you were to look at Friends, I'm not going to spoil anything for anybody. I'm going to use very ancient film references so that we all feel safe. And if I spoil something that you should have watched 10 years ago, that's on you. So Friends, if we look at that friend group, we have two people who are in absolute opposition to one another, right? Phoebe lives in this world and Ross lives in this world, and they are driving in totally different directions, right? So they would pull that friend group apart. And so we also have Rachel and Joey, and they're mirror images of one another. So they're not identical, but if I was to tell you that one of them is a vain, superficial, like self-centered person, which one was I talking about? Both of them. Both of them. And they do that in different ways. So because they reflect each other, they hold space here. And that means that Phoebe and Ross are held in place as well, right? And then that leaves Monica and Chandler to come and go as they need to. So sometimes Chandler is way more like Joey, and sometimes Chandler is way more like Ross. And same with Monica, with Phoebe and Rachel. Yes, you're with me? So that ensemble holds its shape. So anytime you're doing an ensemble piece, especially in comedy, comedy's so hard to write, make sure that you look at who they are and whether or not they have enough inherent conflict between them to keep them moving forward. Because that's it. Conflict is what's moving you forward. When we resolve all of our conflicts, the audience goes home, right? So this is not like a 1980s family sitcom where everything is wrapped up in a nice little bow at the end. Our goal is to be writing, in this case, features or creating a pilot for a series. And we're not writing any 10-minute shorts anymore, right? We've all graduated and we're ready to take the dive into features. Yes, yes, good. So that's the way that tensegrity works. And I want you to start thinking about your characters in terms of that. Sometimes you create your antagonist first, and they are amazing, and that is what helps you figure out who your protagonist needs to be, right? Sometimes you know who your protagonist is, and you're not 100% sure what your antagonist is. So use them. Figure out where they live in opposition to one another, and then figure out the ways in which they're similar, because their similarities are going to cause a lot of tension for you, and that's great. So the next part I want to talk about is getting the audience on your side. One thing that I encounter regularly is a script in which I don't care about the protagonist. And it hurts because then they're long to read, but it also hurts because this might be an amazing story and I'm not engaged in it. And to give you reference, I have 20 years of being super engaged with all kinds of scripts. I'm in for anything. I'm game. If you tell me with enough enthusiasm that we're going this place, I'm going there with you. So if I'm struggling to relate to your character, to find some way of connecting with them, that's a problem. So one of the things that we do is we want to make sure that we meet your character in a positive light. What I mean by that is they need to have agency. They may or may not have power. but agency is a must. So think about when we were introduced to Black Widow in the Avengers. She is strapped to a chair, being tortured, but she's also asking questions, and then she takes a phone call. She's got agency. She doesn't have power in that situation because she's still strapped to a chair, but she does have agency. And I am on board right away, right? Because she at least is thinking for herself. And that's the one thing that you need to make sure your character is doing. They might not be thinking well. They can be bad at thinking. They can think wrong things, but as long as they're thinking for themselves, that puts one little hook in your audience, and you want as many in them as possible. It's like fishing, as many hooks in the big fish as possible to drag them in. So that's a really important thing. One of the other things is making sure that you bond really quickly with your characters. There's a lot of ways of doing that, but there's a short list that is the fastest way of doing it. And that is having your audience share joy, pain, embarrassment, or trauma. So shared joy. I always think of wedding crashers. It's these two idiots who crash weddings, and they do nothing but love the crap out of weddings. And they make sure that everybody has a good time. And that movie opens with a montage of these guys getting everybody involved. Grandma's on the dance floor, we're breaking the glass, we're eating cake, everybody's having a good time. I immediately am caught up in their joy, and now I will follow them anywhere. And that script did not go places that I normally like, right? It hasn't aged well. It's not a well-aged film. So that. Shared pain. I love to use The Fugitive as an example of this. In fairness, I love to use The Fugitive as an example of a lot of things because it's just a really good movie. But that movie opens with a montage that is split between Harrison Ford's interrogation and the actual murder of his wife. And his interrogation hurts. He's being asked questions, and you know that they think he did it. And you are seeing the scene where he clearly did not. It hurts. He hurts. That's pain. So we get involved with that. Embarrassment. I like 13 going on 30. The movie starts with the studio logo, and the studio logo fades out, and it just stays with the clouds. And the first thing you hear is "Move it, Dorcas." And you realize the clouds are the background for picture day, and this awkward girl sits down to have her school photo taken, and it is the worst. And I cringe inside. I get like physical pangs of embarrassment over that because we've all been that student. Or maybe I'm the only one who's been that student, and you all were cool in high school, but I was not. And that moment is embarrassing, and now I am embarrassed for her, right? So we feel for that person. Trauma is the fastest way to bond with your character, but it also sometimes falls apart really quickly. So you need to just sort of be careful of how you use trauma. The example I love to use for this one is Children of Men. The movie opens with a guy in a really overcrowded cafe getting a coffee, and everybody's watching the news because it turns out the youngest person on the planet was murdered at age 18. And it takes you a second to realize the youngest person on the planet. So in 18 years, no human being has been born. And he doesn't care. He gets his coffee and he leaves. So I've had traumatic news, and now I'm following this guy out of the cafe, and he's out of the cafe for about 3 seconds, and it blows up. So I'm on board, and I'm also a little bit terrified, right? Shared trauma. There's one more that if you use it well, it is amazing. And if you don't use it well, it is awful. And we've all read scripts or watched movies where it did not go well, but that is engaging your audience's curiosity. And my favorite example is Coda. When that movie opens, the camera's flying over the water towards a fishing boat, and you can hear a radio, and you can hear a young woman singing to the radio, and she is singing her frickin' heart out. And you get onto the boat, and she is here, and she's singing, and there's a guy here, and there's a guy there, and they are less than 2 feet away from her, and they are not acknowledging her at all. Like, at all. I'm like, how do you not engage with that? How are you tuning that out completely? And then she signals to one of them and gets their attention and starts signing, and you realize, oh, they're deaf. But I had enough curiosity to say, what is happening here? What's her story? What is going on? That I jumped in. And then I jumped into a subject matter that was interesting enough to stay on board. If I jump into a subject matter that is boring, I'm jumping right back out, right? So try to find a way to get me to bond with your character, because you need me to walk side by side with your character all the way through to the end of a feature. And you have seen movies that are 3 hours and feel like this, and you have watched movies that are like 90 minutes and you feel like you lost your life and you waited so long for it to be over. The long ones, we're not walking with your protagonist. We're like being dragged behind. And we've done that, right? We've all either read or written scripts where you're like, thing doesn't work, but the rhythm is off. The rhythm is often off because you didn't bond with your character, and so you're a half step behind your protagonist in a way that doesn't feel good. And it takes a really long time to learn what that feeling is, but you get it like somewhere around here, where it's like, you can't always name it. That's part of it. Is I didn't connect with this character, right? So the next thing you want to do is make sure that your audience connects with your character's goals and their stakes. So I might like your person and not give a rat's ass about their goal, right? If they're trying to go somewhere and do a thing and I don't care, I've got about 3.5 minutes before I stop liking your character. So we want to get them super engaged with the goal. So one thing about that is relying on empathy. And all of this workshop is about empathy, right? It's about my ability to tap into your empathy. You can identify with my character, so you are coming with me, right? When I said I was embarrassed for that girl in 13 going on 30 with her awkward school photo, that's empathy. And I can feel it in my body, right? So I want that empathy to extend past the creation of a human and into their goals and their stakes. So you do not have to get their goal. You don't have to relate to their goal. You just have to believe in their goal the way that they believe in their goal. I cannot relate to 3 men escaping a chain gang in the 1920s in order to go and find a hidden treasure. But I was 100% on board with Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And like, that's the plot. It's insane. I have no way of relating to, none of us can relate to that. I have no way of relating to a drug dealer. I have no way of relating to someone who has been human trafficked. I have no way of relating to someone who is married to a farmer in the middle of nowhere. I can't relate to that. There's no frame of reference in me that is the same as that. But you have my empathy. And that's our goal. So if I have some kind of hook into your protagonist because I like them and I'm empathetic to them, then all you have to do is convince me that their goal is 100% worth the hassle to them, right? I don't care whether or not those 3 weirdos find the hidden treasure. I care that they care about finding the hidden treasure. Good enough. Good enough. So when you set out your goal, ask yourself whether or not you know why it's important to that character. And ask yourself that when you're reading scripts, and we are reading scripts, right? We're reading as many scripts as we can get our hands on all the time. But ask yourself, do I know why this is important? Ask yourself if you know how that goal can be measured, how they're going to know when they reach their goal. Ask yourself if you know the impact that goal is going to have on them. And then circle back to empathy. Do I feel the pain that they will feel if they fail to reach their goal? Right? Because the failure to reach your goal, those are the stakes, right? My goal is the thing that I'm going after. The stakes are the thing that's going to happen if I don't reach it. So I use the example every year of like the farmer goes in and needs to get an extension on the mortgage, otherwise he loses the farm. My goal as the protagonist, get an extension on my mortgage. But my antagonist works at the bank and has been told if you give one more damn extension, you're fired. So when I sit across the desk from that person, my goal is A, their goal is not A. I have your empathy, and now you believe that my goal is worth it to me. I have to get this money or I lose the farm, right? Goals, stakes, and we're in. Okay. I think one of the things that's important about this is that if I don't care about your stakes, if I don't care about the outcome of you failing to reach your goal, then what happens is I kind of stop caring about your goal. And if I stop caring about your goal, we're right back to me in the back of the theater eating popcorn and planning my grocery list because I'm not engaged anymore. So when you're watching a film and you're suddenly like doing your grocery list or like grabbing your phone, ask yourself what went wrong. Am I still engaged with the character? Yes? Cool. Am I engaged with their goal? Do I think it's worth it? Absolutely. On board. So then there's something with the stakes. I don't believe that the goal is worth it to them because they didn't get to the right why, right? Why am I doing this? Why is this important? Why does this feel like life or death to me? And it does not matter if it's actually life or death. Ask any 11-year-old, if they do not get to the soccer game on time, it is life or death, right? Everything is so dramatic. But it means that to them. And so if I'm on board with your goals, if I believe that it feels like life or death, then I'm in. So that's often where we go awry, is that we didn't get everybody on board with our stakes. So think about that as like one of the possible things that might have lost you in a script, right? One of the things that's really important for me is that as you guys become stronger with your screenwriting, I want you to also get used to the vocabulary of why you're not engaged in the story anymore. Because we know when we're not, and we don't always know why, or we know why something doesn't work here, but like something doesn't work here is the best vocabulary we can come up with to name the thing that didn't work. So I want you guys to slowly learn what might have gone wrong, or when you watch a story that you're like, I had no idea this was going to be so engaging. Like, what did they do right? How did they get you when you were resistant? Because I've had that happen. Going into a movie being like, this is going to be the dumbest thing in the world and it is wasting my time. And then I leave and I'm crying and I've lost like 3 pounds worth of tears. Like it's a thing that happens. They got me and they did it well and they kept me engaged all the way to the end, right? So you want your people to be worth my empathy. You want your goals to be worth my empathy. You want your stakes to be worth my empathy. And then I'm in. And then no matter what kind of peril you put your protagonist in, no matter what kind of obstacles you put in front of them, I am rooting for them 100%, right? Because when you get to the Act 2, 3 turning point, that moment where all is lost and you're like, oh shit, this person is never gonna survive the climax. And they're broken down. And you realize the person who started this film would never have chosen to go into that climactic moment. But they've changed enough, and I've followed them enough because my empathy has taken me with them enough that in this moment, I think they're gonna go into that climactic moment, and I am super on board, even if it feels like they're like marching to their own doom. I am on board, right? And you need that, because by the time you get there, we are emotionally exhausted, even if it's a funny story. It's playing with your emotions, and you're getting towards the finish line. So you need that last burst to get you all the way to the end, and your empathy is the thing that's gonna carry, right? Yeah? Not if this makes sense. Yes? Excellent, thank you. So the next thing that I wanna talk about is part of this and kind of not. So we've been doing something very linear, and now I'm sort of gonna take a little sidestep. We're gonna talk about the willing suspension of disbelief, because that's really important, and I think we throw that expression around and we don't always know exactly what it means. So this is my willingness to say, in this world, the sky is purple, I'm in. It's literally getting your audience to say, I'm in, to whatever circumstance you put in front of them. So here's the deal. I said it earlier, I've said it every single year. I am game for anything. If you tell me with enough enthusiasm, I will go anywhere with you. Heavenly Creatures from moment 3. Like by the 3rd minute, I was in. 2 teenage girls with a creepily enmeshed relationship who kill someone's mom, and it's based on a real story. And I was super into it, including the weird moment with like the claymation chess pieces. Like weird and offside, and I was super into it, right? Like Minds. 2 teens kill a classmate, and someone has to decide whether or not they should be tried as adults. I cannot relate to anything in this story. I have not yet committed murder, and I'm not in the position to decide if anyone should be tried as an adult. But I was super involved, and I went all the way to the end, and that is a hard film to watch. It's a hard film to watch, right? But like, if I can get involved in that, someone has done a good job of engaging me. My point of breaking is very different than yours. And you each have your own point of breaking. So what we do as writers is we say, I've got all your empathy, and now I want you to dive into this world with me, where there are talking trees, and hobbits, and elves, and dwarves, and magical rings, right? We're going here. I want you to jump in and follow me all the way to the end. I can't always do that. So what you can do for me as a writer is give me the facts of this world. Give me the facts about your protagonist. If we think of willing suspension of disbelief as the metaphor of like jumping across a canyon, or like Super Mario Brothers, getting from one of those little things to another little thing without falling in the hole, which I always did. I'm terrible at video games. But if you think of that, I can stand at the end and jump as far across the canyon as you want, because that's me. My mom has 0 willing suspension of disbelief. She's got she's got this. She needs a running start. And what you're going to do as a writer is use facts as traction. People need a running start. You teach them about the world. You take your time. You build it. You give me the facts about your protagonist. Don't tug on my heartstrings yet, I'm not ready. But give me the facts about who they are. And then a little heartstring, and then more facts, and then a little heartstring, and then more facts, and then this little piece of the goal, and then more facts. And eventually what you do is you trick people into taking a running jump, right? And the goal is we all get across the canyon together, and we all get engaged in whatever story you have put in front of me. Does that make sense? Yes? Excellent. Perfect. So, for me, I think that the most important thing and the hardest thing for me to learn was making characters that feel real in the world that I created. So one of these things is about getting hooked into your characters, and getting hooked into the willing suspension of disbelief means that that is the right character for this world, right? And they have to jive together. It all has to feel seamless. And you don't know when it's happening well. You will not notice it. You're just all the way into the story. You will notice when it's not happening well, when something doesn't jive, something bumps for you. So I want you to think realistically about the world that you've created and who are the people who occupy this world and whether or not they're the right people to occupy this world, right? So for me, there's like a little quick list that I like to use. Do they have the right level of intelligence to operate in this world? Or if they don't, is that deliberate? Have you done that on purpose, right? Do they have any of the right skills? Or are they going to learn the right skills, right? So think about any of the Bourne movies. You've been trained, you're amazing. A History of Violence, you were trained, well, trained-ish, and you are amazing, versus like North by Northwest. A Simple Plan, has everybody seen that movie? Simple Plan? Add it to your list, it's amazing. But it's like everyday Joes who get involved in an accidental sort of ish criminal enterprise who are in way over their heads. Way over their heads. This is what happens when you find money that was stolen and is not yours. Don't do it, you are in over your head, right? But they are going to develop the skills that they need to survive this story. A little. They're gonna do their best. It's not great. So I think that, oh, you know what? Castaway is a perfect example of that. Okay, mailman, here later, FedEx delivery guy, alone on an island. And the reason you know this is like an everyman succeeding is because he has that moment where he builds that giant bonfire and he like screams to the gods, "Look, I have made fire." And it's an amazing moment, but you're like, that took you 5 minutes of screen time, like a day and a half in your world to make that fire. So you did not start out with all of the skills, but you learned them, and by the end, he and Wilson had a raft. He developed skills. He survived. It's fine. So that, make sure that they're the right character in the world. One of the things that you will notice is that the press reporting on a film will be about the wrong thing, and that's when you know you've got something wrong with the character in the world. The best example of this, for me, Bryce Dallas Howard in high heels, running through a man-made jungle, being chased by dinosaurs. And all the press could talk about was that she was in high heels. I do not care about her footwear. I don't care. But what I care about is the fact that this movie told me she was a leader. And they said, follow her through the jungle and you will be okay. That's what that movie told me. She's a leader. She's not a leader. She's not equipped for the job, right? Laura Dern was a leader in the first one. She wore hiking boots. She knew what she was doing. We believed her, right? So sometimes your character is not the right character for that part of your world. Now, if she had been in high heels and found a solution for her footwear, or just walked out of them Cinderella style and just kept moving, I'm in. I'm game. In fact, I am probably going to cringe with empathy when she steps on a twig, because that's gonna hurt. But we stayed in those perfect, immaculate high heels, and we ran through the jungle, and I don't buy it. I don't buy it. And that's the thing that you're gonna have in your head, or you're gonna hear from your audience, I don't buy it, I don't buy it, I don't buy it. I'm not engaged, because I don't believe you, right? So a really big part of this is that thing, I don't buy it. I've nicknamed this section, sometimes shit doesn't fly, right? It doesn't fly. So when we talk about your audience buy-in, we're gonna talk about whether or not they will follow you to the next step of your story. So one of these things that happens is the buy-in is instantaneous, and the failure of the buy-in is instantaneous. You might not get out of a scene and you've lost your audience. They don't get to the end of a sequence and decide, well, I didn't really like that car chase, so I'm moving on to something else. I'm changing the channel. I'm picking up my phone. I'm making my grocery list. It is instantaneous, right? It happened for me in The Walking Dead. I slogged through the season where they were separated and half of them ended up in a prison. All I wanted was 2 characters to be reunited. And the nanosecond they were, I was done. I turned the TV off. I wasn't even done the episode. I wasn't even done the rest of that scene. I was done. Because I didn't have buy-in with anybody else. And I had the temerity to stick through all of it for those 2 characters. They were reunited. I'm done. I'm out. Your audience will do that. And they will throw up their hands like, ugh, forget it. And you have no idea what will and will not set off their alarms. So your best bet is to plan for everything. And I like to run my ideas past people because people who are not me have really good bullshit detectors about my ideas. I do not until at least the 3rd draft. On my 1st draft, I am a genius. I have finished a thing. It is amazing. Someone else needs to tell me that it's wrong or that it's not working, because I have a gold star and I'm gonna ride on that gold star for a little while, right? So you need somebody else's input at that point. I think, for me, there's a quick list. This is not at all comprehensive, but I do want you to think about this, because these are things that immediately pull me out of a script and like make me aggressively angry about things. Those of you who know me, I don't get particularly angry about things, but story pisses me off in a way that nothing else can, and I allow myself to get a little violent with it. I have thrown books across the room. It's a thing. Number 1, Do not make your character sing. Don't make them sing. Don't. Unless you are doing that awkward moment where like Guitar Hero hones in and is serenading you with like way too much eye contact. Do that. Play that for comedy. That is awful. Anyone who has ever been serenaded knows that you want the earth to open up and swallow you whole. It is the worst moment ever. And it doesn't matter how talented they are. It's just you and them, and they're looking right at you while they're doing a thing. It's awful. Yes, that's a character who can sing. If you have someone for whom a performance is actually part of the plot or part of their character, awesome. Great. Nobody else sings. Don't. Oftentimes what happens when we have those moments as a shortcut to show like, this person is super creative. Find another way. Find another way. Because whatever it is that you're writing on the page, this is an energy transference business that was given to me years ago by Corey Mandel, and I use it all the time. When I put that on the page, it immediately grinds the plot to a halt. Nothing slows a story down more than someone sitting at the piano and playing a tune and everybody like listening along and then like clapping at the end. It's awful. It's super awkward. Take it out. Find something better, because you can. That was just like the third idea on your top 10 list. Toss out your top 10 list, work on ideas 11 through 20. Something in there is where you need to be, right? Because those first 10 options, that's the same 10 options that anybody in the audience can come up with. You got to be smarter than them, right? And it's work, it sucks, but toss that option. The second thing that drives me bananas, this is now just becoming a Rebecca gets pissed off about these things list. The second thing that drives me absolutely nuts is when your character quotes song lyrics. Because it's lazy. It is lazy. John's laughing because he knows the exact script that drove me bananas this summer, but it is lazy. That songwriter twisted themselves around to find a way to express that exact thing in a way that is beautiful, and yes, it speaks to your soul, because that's its job. So what's your job? Your job is to find a way to make your character say what it is that they feel in a way that is authentic to them. And tell the truth about your character. If I have a character that has zero self-awareness, whose best bet is to reach for a song lyric because they don't know how to say the thing that they feel, they're gonna do that. And it's gonna fail them. Show me that it fails. Show me that they tried. Show me that they failed. Show me that they then had to do the hard work of putting what they feel into language. Because we feel things in our bodies. Our sensory body knows before our brain knows. We don't always have the vocabulary to name what it is that we feel in the moment. I can tell you right away, I have looked back at moments and said, oh, it turns out I was really frustrated at that time, and I did not realize it. I don't always know to name it in the moment. You don't always know that moment that you fall in love with someone. You don't always know that moment where you build up this little piece of resentment that is going to chip away at that relationship over time. You don't always know. But eventually you have to be able to name it. So that means that you have to do the hard work, which sucks. I'm sorry. But do the hard work. The next thing that drives me insane, and I've spoken about it recently, do not have your character be something that they were not 5 minutes before, and they will not be 5 minutes from now. They do not get to show up suddenly and be more intelligent than they were in the beginning. They do not get to show up suddenly and have the ability to shoot or like be someone who prays over things. You don't show up with something in the middle of Act 2 because my plot needs it, and then it goes away. Because your audience will lose it. Okay, your audience won't lose it. I will lose it, your audience will be disengaged. Because where the hell was that in the beginning? You didn't tell me that was part of your character. You didn't tell me they had this ability or this skill or this vulnerability or this like spiritual connection to something else. And it's never gonna come up again. You cheated. You cheated. You didn't put the gun under the table in Act 1. You don't get to fire the gun in the middle of Act 2, right? Yeah? Don't cheat. And if I catch you cheating, you know that I'm going to say, go back to the drawing board. Because here's the thing that happens. You get to a place where there's a problem with your plot, and you try to fill it with a behavior that is abnormal for your character, right? So like a tiny little plot hole. It's not that big. I can fix it in one scene. I'm just going to have my character sing. It'll be perfect, right? No, it won't. My character is suddenly going to pray to a God I didn't know they believed in. No. So you have to find a way to make every moment that I'm with your character feel authentic to them. And if you get to a place later on in your script where your character does something and you're like, this is probably not going to ring true, but it's beautiful and I want to keep it. Cool. Put a little Post-it note there. And on your next draft, go back and write it in from the beginning. Or write in the potential for it from the beginning, right? Because it doesn't mean this character can never do this thing. It means this character couldn't sell the idea that they could do this thing in this draft. Go back to the beginning. Try again. Because all writing is rewriting, you're going to redo your draft about 8,000 times anyway, and then you're going to put draft 1 on the cover page and send it out the door because no one ever needs to know how much you rewrote things behind the scenes, right? Yes, never. So I think a big part of this is that caricatures behave that way. But a real 3D person, they will tell you who they are. And you will feel it, right? You'll feel it. And you can sense, and everybody has a spidey sense. They sense when a character has kind of gone off the rails and you're like, something here doesn't work the way that it did 2.5 minutes ago. Because they were real to you 2.5 minutes ago. They felt like a real person. They felt like someone you might know, or they felt like someone you might want to know, or someone you would be terrified to meet in a dark alley, doesn't matter. But they felt real. And this thing made them stop feeling real. Suddenly they were a caricature of a person, we squashed them into 2D, and then we expect them to just pop out and be 3D again in 5 minutes? It doesn't work. It's too late. You've lost me. I'm in the back of the theater eating popcorn and planning my grocery list. So you've got to take all of the time that you need to build a character that you believe in, that I believe in, that everyone can believe in from beginning to end, and it doesn't matter. Take your time in the planning phase, right? I'm going to speak really quickly about something that isn't part of my notes, but I think is necessary now that I'm talking about this. We sometimes are writing characters who are not just dissimilar to ourselves, but who do not share our values. It happens, right? Sometimes what your story requires is a character who's racist or someone who's willing to tell a fat joke, right? And that is not you. You are not racist. You are not willing to tell those kinds of jokes. It's amazing. You are wonderful. However, your character needs to be that person. A thing that is very helpful when you have that situation is to make sure that your action lines do not depict that racism. It only lives in the dialogue because you as a writer are not that person. You do not have that phobia. You are not bigoted in any kind of way. You do not have a huge amount of anger towards a particular group of people anywhere. You are neutral, but your character is not. And if you want to get away with having a character whose values you think will not match your audience, someone needs to call them out on it. It doesn't need to be big, but someone needs to call them out on it. And it doesn't have to take a huge amount of time. And it doesn't mean that they have to change. If your story requires that this person be a homophobe from beginning all the way to the end, that's okay. I mean, it's awful, but if that's what that character needs in order for the rest of your story to work, okay. But someone in there, at some point, needs to call them out on it, even if it's just a shared look across the room of like, what the fuck is with this guy, right? Call them out on it. A lot of times what happens when we're first starting to write is that we need one of those characters for our plot. And it's a very delicate thing to create a character who is off-putting, right? And we've all watched movies with a character that you were like, ugh, they give you the icks. But they're so well made. and they're such a good character, and you're like, ugh, I hate you, but also I'm super into this and I can't believe it. We all know what that's like. It's a very delicate thing. Take your time. Go slowly. Practice. Rewrite. And then tell the truth. Because whether or not you share the same values as that character, they are still a human being, and they still are a full human being. I might not like this thing about you, but here are all of these other things that are in fact likable, because no one is just one thing, right? So when you are creating your 3D characters, just know they might not always be in 3D everything that you love. And that's okay, but you need to acknowledge it in some way, somehow. And it doesn't need to be huge, okay? That little chat never lands well. It's always super awkward because no one wants to think, oh my God, I'm gonna write something like that someday, but you might, it happens. So just be gentle with yourself, be gentle with your work, go back and rewrite, and then find someone that you love and trust who is also very critical of your work to say, read this and tell me if it works. Because they will look at that character objectively in a way that you maybe can't because you're on the inside of the story. Right? Okay, let's move on from that one because that everyone's like, eh. One of the things that is important for you as a writer is to get deep with your characters. Like, build them out. Give them, you don't have to put it on the page. It doesn't all have to live on the page, but like, give them something that they believe in that motivates them to respond to situations a certain way, right? And we know what that's like in our lives because we've been talking to someone and they say something and you're like, I think that you don't believe in this, or that you must be someone who subscribes to this ideology. They didn't say it out loud. Something about what they were saying indicated to you that that was probably the truth, right? Your characters can do that same thing because they're three-dimensional. And we're working towards making them feel like real humans. And humans have moments where we reveal things about ourselves that we were not intending to reveal about ourselves. It happens, and you're gonna be doing it in your writing anyway. You might think that you're disguising yourself in your writing. That is your soul on the page. We see you, right? And it's okay. We love you anyway. We all do. But I want you to think about that. One of the things that is really helpful is to make your characters vulnerable. And that means that you have to be vulnerable. Sorry, but you do, right? You have to figure out what hurts you. Like really, what really breaks your heart? What really pisses you off? What are you happy to walk away from and never think about again? If you can start telling the truth to yourself about those things, you've got this huge bunch of material that you can then tap into when you're creating your characters. But it does mean that you, as the writer, have to get vulnerable. This is where I quietly mention, like, start journaling, get a therapist, something. Support yourself. Find something where you don't, like, leave every writing session feeling like an exposed nerve. Don't do that. Don't expose yourself entirely through your writing. Just be willing to say, this is gonna hurt. And be willing to say, oh God, I'm about to hurt my character. Because you love your characters. And your job is to put them through the ringer. So you're gonna have to hurt them. And if you pull your punches, your audience is not gonna thank you for it. They're gonna tell you, you're throwing a softball, I'm not interested. I don't buy it. So get a little bit vulnerable. A big thing that I love is that scene in Ted Lasso. Has everybody watched Ted Lasso? Y'all need to watch Ted Lasso. It is amazing. There's a moment where he's playing the darts and he's talking about how he took his kid to preschool and there was a quote on the wall that said, be curious, not judgmental. And he talks about how, like, he had always felt judged and made fun of and put down. And if those people had been curious and not judgmental, they might have asked him a series of questions that then helps him have an amazing scene where he's like, the winner, it's a winning moment for him. But I want you to apply that to your life, right? Be curious. And be curious about other people. Other people are amazing. I recommend all the time eavesdropping on other people, not just to collect the weird ways in which people talk, because they do. No two people talk the same way, and your characters can't all talk like you, and they can't all talk like each other. So collect language, but also try to understand, what might this person be feeling? And develop the habit of saying, I wonder if, instead of, I bet that person. Do you see the difference? Right? I wonder if they're pissed off. Or I wonder if they were just scared and it came out as anger. But if you decide that they're pissed off, then it never occurs to you that they were actually terrified. And what they need is for you to step in. They don't want you to back away because they're pissed. Right? So if you can start observing that in the people around you, you then have that as part of your language and part of the vocabulary of your characters when you go to build them. Yeah? Okay. The thing about knowing your characters well and having written them with a lot of empathy is that you end up with characters who say things out loud that hurt. It hurts to write them. It feels awkward. It feels terrible. The name of this lesson that was given to me is called Out of the Mouth of Jung. And it's the idea that that id, that thing that drives you through the world that you are not conscious of, suddenly like shows up and comes right out your mouth, right? And it's a need. I am saying that needed thing out loud. Forrest Gump, I may not know what love is, but I know. Like, I may not know much, but I know what love is, right? He didn't want to say that. He needed to say that. That came from his need. That came from that internal thing. And when we talk about characters, we talk about giving them a want, a goal, and a need, the stakes, right? Underneath all of that is that other layer of why this matters for this person. Forrest Gump has enough self-awareness to realize that he is not operating on the same intellectual level as everybody else, but he does know what love is. And he knows when you have denied him love, right? And it hurts. And it hurts to say that. But you know that line is going to be quoted for 10 years, and you know it's going to make it into the trailer, right? So we're going to just take a moment to think about like famous lines and whether or not they were based on a character's need or their want, so you can start to see the difference. So Billy Elliot is asked at the end of his big audition, what does it feel like when you dance? And he has no idea. He has no idea. And you can feel him, he's sort of like moving around because he's in his sensory body. And he finally is like, it feels like electricity. It feels like electricity in my body. That's a need. He needed to say that, right? And not just because someone put him on the spot. That is what it feels like, and it came right up from his soul and straight out his mouth, right? But in A Few Good Men, you can't handle the truth. That's a want. That's a guy who wants to brag to you about this shitty thing that he did, and he can barely contain himself. And I mean, he's gonna disguise it under like, you don't actually want this story. You totally want this story, right? That's a want. That's a character exercising their ego. That comes from a different place. It didn't come from his soul. It came from somewhere up here, right? When Harry Met Sally, it's one of my favorites. At the end, Billy Crystal says, when you realize you want to spend the rest of your life with somebody, you want the rest of your life to start as soon as possible. Do you think that's a want or a need? It's a need, man. It's a need. He needed to say that out loud because that was like his big revelation moment. Like, I had this light bulb and my soul has changed. You must now hear the light bulb moment. That's what that's about, right? The Princess Bride, my name is Inigo Montoya, you killed my father, prepare to die. Is that a want or a need? That's a want. I want to look you in the eye and tell you, I'm gonna kill you because you killed my dad. And that is that character's equivalent of kind of this dance, right? Except that it's like a PG movie, so like I can't say that, I can't do the dance, but that's a want. My ego wanted that, my heart wanted that, but that didn't come up from my soul. Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. Do you think that's a need or a want? The answer is it depends on who's saying it, right? So if it's someone who actually has all of the power, when they say that, that's a need. But if it's someone else telling you, you got to start making better choices. That's a want, right? I want you to be better equipped to be you in the world. Be more responsible. That's a want, right? In E.T., the line E.T. phone home, that is a need. He does not belong on this planet and he needs to go home. That's it. That's a need, right? The Sixth Sense, I see dead people. That's a need. But the name is Bond, James Bond. That's a want. That's all ego. That lives on the surface. And he's still James Bond if I get rid of that line. I mean, he's not as cool, but he's still James Bond if I get rid of that line. But when that little kid says, I see dead people, that's his most horrible secret. And he rips that right out of his soul, straight out of his mouth, right? Oh, Captain, my Captain, at the end of Dead Poets Society. Ethan Hawke standing on a desk. Oh, Captain, my Captain. It's not even his line. That is a need. That's a guy who has no way of saying, you have changed my life, everything is upside down, and now you're leaving. And I don't know how to acknowledge the size of what I feel right now. So I'm just gonna use this line and I'm hoping that it works, right? Right. One of my favorites recently, Little Women. There's that little speech that's being given, and it sort of ends with, like, I'm sick of people saying that love is all a woman is for. I'm so sick of it, but I'm so lonely. That speech broke my heart. That's a need. She needed to admit that horrible thing out loud because she's a three-dimensional person. These are all three-dimensional characters, and someone took the time to love them and to write them with love, even when they're horrible people. And sometimes you can be totally on side with a horrible person making bad choices, doing terrible things, because they're so well written. You all sat through Breaking Bad. That is not a story about a man who is a high school chemistry teacher discovering that he can be a Heisenberg. That's a man revealing to you over 5 seasons that he has always been Heisenberg. And you sat through all of it. We loved it. It was amazing. We're watching the prequel. It was awesome because someone loved him. Last thing I want to say is about representation. Not every character who lives in the world looks like you. Not every character who lives in the world thinks like you, believes the things that you believe. So make sure that you find a way that feels safe and responsible to make the world of your movie look like the world around you. Does that make sense? And representation works in a number of different ways, right? So I use 2 examples from Disney for this because they make the most sense. When you look at Mirabel from Encanto, she's the only non-magical person in a family full of magical people. She was amazing. That movie was amazing because suddenly all of these Latino people saw themselves on the screen and their culture was represented. And it was awesome. And they sang in Spanish. It was amazing. But we also all share the experience of knowing what it's like to not be special surrounded by special people. To have that moment where, like, I don't measure up. That representation works 2 ways, right? I also like Inside Out. Riley, that character, she's openly grieving. She moved across the country. She abandoned her friends. She left behind her school and everything that she knew. And she's young enough for that to have been the whole world. Right? It wasn't just these are the things that I knew. That was my whole world. And so we get that grief. We get what it's like to lose something that feels like everything to you. But more than that, that's the beginnings of depression. And all of a sudden, there's a huge swath of the population who sees themselves reflected on the screen in a way that they hadn't previously. Right? So representation is a thing. When you have created your characters, and you've made them with all of that love and all of that empathy, and you've turned them into 3D people who will live in your world and do amazing things and take me along for the whole ride. Ask yourself if there's an opportunity for them to represent more than what lives on the surface. Can they mean more to you, to your audience, or do they not have to? Like, Superman doesn't mean more than what Superman is. He's this deep and cool. He's doing what he's doing. But a character who works at the bank down the street, someone who lives in a world that looks like mine, maybe there's a chance to make them mean more. Yeah? Okay. I'm gonna leave you with a quick list of things that you need to do as a writer, things you need to know to write a screenplay, because it's come up lately, so I wanna give them to you. So number one, write your action in the active voice. Do we know what the difference between the active and the passive voice is? Right? Okay, good. All right. Write your action lines in the order that the camera picks them up. So when you picture these things, most of us, when we are writing in film, are actually watching the movie in our heads and trying to like translate that into words on a page. It drives us all bananas. Yes? We all do that? Yeah. Okay. You need to start breaking down all of that stuff in your head into the order in which it will have to appear on the camera. Because if you get to the end of the scene and you forgot to mention the broccoli at the beginning, none of this makes sense, right? Camera needs to hit the broccoli because I need to know about the broccoli, otherwise I don't understand what's happening at the dinner table, right? Okay. Choose your words wisely. You are a writer. Your number one tool is your vocabulary. Build it. Just build it. Get more words. And use them. Use accurate verbs. Stop using adverbs. No one runs quickly. They sprint. Sprint's a much better verb in that moment, right? Choose your verbs and make them really impactful. Get a thesaurus or go to thesaurus.com and spend your time and choose accurate words. Don't like, hey, this is a fancier sounding synonym for this word. It might not mean the exact same thing. It might be over here, and you are looking for precision right here, right? Use your onomatopoeias. Do we know what those are? Words that make the sound that they're doing, like ouch, bang. Okay, use those. What you want to do is have laser precision with your writing so that you can have as much white space as possible, because our goal is white space. When we have as much white space as possible on the page, we've got clarity, most of the time, right? But if I look at a big, giant paragraph and I have to slog through all of that to get through your first line of dialogue, that's my reaction to it. And I mean, I will do it, but ugh. So, that. And then the very last thing that I recommend to you as a human being and as a writer, journal. About everything, everything. And it doesn't have to be the same thing twice, but journal. If you need to set a timer, set a timer. Tell me about your day. Tell me what you observed in the world. Tell me about what you feel. Tell me about that horrible dream you had last night that woke you up at 2 o'clock in the morning in a cold sweat. Write it down. And just get in the habit of doing that. One thing that makes a good writer great is the ability to watch the world and take it all in. Because our jobs is to take that all in, make it make sense, and hand it to you. Our job is to interpret the world for you. So we're supposed to be better at it. We're supposed to notice stuff that other people don't, right? So journal. We're good? We're good? I'm done? I'm out of time? Yes? Excellent. Thank you so much for coming. Much appreciated.